Welcome back to the Remedial Film Class Podcast. I'm your host, Dan.
And I'm not Travis.
Oh, no. Wait, hold on. Where's Travis?
Travis is, he did like a Ferris Bueller or something.
Travis.
Can't find him. His hands were
Travis.
clammy or something, and he just... His wife said he could stay home today. I don't know.
He got a note from his parents.
Right.
And are you George?
I am, yeah.
Hey, George.
I am.
Well, we're flying without Travis tonight. We're doing a little bit of a last-minute audible. We were going to wait on heat until Travis gets back because we can't talk about Michael the Man without Travis. So we circled back and explored some of the influences that were used by Nolan and company for Batman Begins. So tonight, George watched Batman Year One because he doesn't read books. So we watched the movie. And then we also watched 2 episodes of the animated series, the Demon's Quest episodes 1 and 2.
Yes.
Parts 1 and 2, that is.
Yeah.
So let's start with Year One. George,
Yeah.
we made you watch an animated movie that's essentially a direct-to-video release, so not exactly theater quality, but interesting. Tell me your initial impressions.
It was, it was what I expected.
What did you expect? Tell me more.
Like, basically, when you told me what it was, I looked it up, and I'm like, okay, it's an hour and 5 minutes, like, animated movie. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, it's going to be like an episode of the cartoon, but, a little longer, and, maybe we'll go into some different things, and it did. It was basically exactly like I thought it would be. There was lots of, like corny one-liners, you know what I mean? Like that you would expect from a Batman comic show,
I guess that's fair without me being insulted.
Stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. I can allow that.
No, not in a bad way. It's just, just some one-liners. It's whatever. They're in there. It was interesting. The characters didn't really reflect how I pictured the characters, especially Lieutenant what's his face?
Flash.
The hell's the lieutenant's name?
Gordon?
Yeah, Gordon. He was a lieutenant in the.
He was a lieutenant in this. He was a sergeant in Batman Begins, but got promoted to lieutenant by the end of it.
Right. But in Year One, he starts as a lieutenant, and he was like not at all my Lieutenant Gordon that I picture in my head. But it's okay.
What was different with this Gordon? What are you missing in this Gordon that you were expecting?
He was like, I don't know, he was like way more muscly and like manly and kind of like, I don't know. Like and like there was like actual like physical fights, like Gordon actually physically fought somebody, which never happened in like the movies that I've seen. Begins and
yeah, it is kind of hard to imagine Pat Hingle in the first Batman movie like straight karate chopping a dude.
Yeah, like he's a martial arts dude. In Year One, he shows someone another police officer who's boss, and this other police officer is like retired Navy SEAL or something like that, or Green Beret, something like that. And he's like, "Oh, it's been a while since I had to do this," and I'm like, "Bro, you did this before?" And I'm like,
yeah, it's really that's an interesting line that when you're reading the book, at least if it's in the book verbatim, I don't know. That never stood out to me, but the way it's presented in the movie, it's real loaded with like, wow, this guy, was he an MP, right?
Right.
Why is he fighting Green Berets? Like, oh, interesting. It really, it's a very loaded quote, and then it's never explored again and left to your imagination.
Actually, there's a lot of that too. Also, Year One was loaded with villains for no reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's supposed to be a highly populated, densely populated criminal underworld, right? So they just They got to give you the
sure,
impression
yeah.
that it's just crawling with bad guys.
Yeah, I recognized so many bad guys, but none of them really had, like, the plot didn't turn in any direction towards any of them. You know,
Yeah, it's tricky. Like
they were all just there.
the
being
arc of the
introduced.
story has nothing to do with any of the villains, really.
Right.
It's and in a lot of ways they do that in Batman Begins. I mean, you could look at Batman Begins and the entire Gotham plot, the plot to destroy Gotham, as one big MacGuffin, right? This thing that gets passed around to distract you while the plot happens. It's like the money in Psycho, right? Like it looks like it'll be the
Yes.
plot. It ought to be the plot, but it's not the plot. It's just a distraction. And so with the Bruce arc in both of these, but especially in Begins, this whole giant, almost like comic book, style caper where they're going to destroy Gotham, it's just like window dressing on the actual story. It's
Right.
interesting.
Very weird.
Kind of ballsy.
Yeah, I'd say.
I will say, though, going back to Batman Begins, I loved at the time feeling like, okay, they've built me this grounded reality where everything is kind of grimdark and rough and like nobody's being too cartoony. And then they still manage like the big cartoony bad guy event at the end, which I did not think that they could pull off in that context. So it's impressive. I mean, it's really similar to the Batman 89 plot, the plot to destroy Gotham.
The Ras Al Ghul, like the train scene?
The train scene, but also just the giant plot to poison the water supply and make everybody go crazy at once. That just seems like a kind of like an 89 with the chemicals. It's very much like that cartoony, like one bad guy, James Bond villain gonna destroy an entire city, but they did it like grounded. Never thought that if you told me ahead of time, if you told me in your elevator pitch, Christopher Nolan, that you would be able to do that, I would say, I don't think you're going to be able to do that. But then he did it.
I agree.
So good for
I
him.
agree with you.
This has none of that. Year one has no end of the world scenario. It's just two dudes.
I really, and credit to Nolan. I mean, obviously he's an incredible director. But like hats off to him for like really developing the reason why Bruce Wayne chooses the bat.
Yeah.
Like, dude, in year one, I'll just like go into it. He's sitting in a room, Bruce Wayne, looking at a bust of his dead father. And he's like talking to his father as if he's there, but he's not. And then, a bat flies in through the glass window, lands on it. It's like this nasty looking bat. And it's like, okay, that's why he's Batman. Contrast that with the Nolan.
Right.
He's playing, he falls in the well. The whole swarm of hundreds, thousands of bats. Like, boom. And then like that is the thing in his life that's his bad dream. That's his nightmare. It sticks with him. Blah, blah, blah. And then there's a little bit of this in year one, but also Nolan really, really hits home that you have to become fear, right? In order to be effective.
Yeah.
Batman has to be fear. No, not that they have to fear him. He has to take on, like, that's his persona. He has to become fear. That makes sense?
Yeah. No, I think
so. That's why he chooses the bat. That's why he chooses the bat. That's what he is really afraid of. Wherein Begins, when he opens that chest and whatever, you open that chest at Ras Al Ghul's compound, whatever you're afraid of is what comes out of that chest. And for him, it was a swarm of bats.
And for you, it'd be like commitment to a single guitar. Ah.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy mackerel. Now, you mentioned James Gordon being musclier than you remembered.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the works of Frank Miller, the guy that wrote this book?
Am I?
Have you ever heard of Frank Miller?
No.
He might be the single most important Batman writer since 1980.
Okay.
Like, he's the guy he wrote a book that was released as a miniseries, and now you can get it as a trade paperback, called The Dark Knight Returns. Okay. And the Tumblr comes from that book. I mean, you could argue that a bunch of stuff from those movies come from the ideas that he put forth in that book, which sees an aged Batman come back from retirement for one last go around with the Joker and Superman, and it's very much stylistically influential on everything they've done since. From Batman 89, very heavily influences Batman 89, even up through Justice League and Batman vs. Superman. The look of Batman in those movies is Frank Miller's Batman.
Okay.
Hulking, muscly, old, grumpy, grimdark, always talking in internal monologues, very.
Yep.
And you get that in year one too, where it's just, the first 4 pages of the book, if I remember right, is all just like that in a box, like narration, internal narration, as opposed to like any kind of actual dialogue happening. And it's all just like raspy voiced, angry guy, too much crime, gonna punch bad,
Right.
Real growly. And that's kind of Frank Miller's thing. If you've ever seen the movie Sin City.
I have, actually, believe it or not.
I'm glad that you've seen it. He wrote those books.
Okay.
That's him. So it's the guy that did Sin City. Before he did Sin City, he did Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, both of which are like the strongest canon to support the Nolan movies.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're dealing with some like, New Testament Batman here.
I like it.
Very important.
Good stuff.
But I will say, like, the Batman voice actor in Year One doesn't have the gravitas that he needs.
Yeah.
I don't like his voice. I don't like his Batman voice. I don't like his Bruce Wayne voice. And I don't like his reading scary things in his grimdark voice. Like, there's just nothing there. It's real bad.
Yeah.
Like, hi, I'm Batman. And I guess I'm going to have to punch this guy because I'm mad at him. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. They're only casting Batman, right?
Okay.
They come on, guys. Come on. Also, the whole plot with like throwing a baby off a bridge, I don't love that. I'm not a big fan. I don't know about you. I don't like movies where babies and children are put into peril just for the sake of the plot. We're not doing anything here except making them, an object for the hero to save, right? And I don't like those as much. Like, I was fine with the weird Rambo movie we watched at Christmas, Deadly Games, because it's like this kid is like the hero of the story and can hold his own and is saving the day actively, right? He's not just a victim to be passed from bad guy to bad guy and then chucked off a bridge. Like,
yeah.
Kind of like, in a lot of ways, it's kind of what Nolan did with Katie Holmes in Batman Begins. Like, I don't know that he really developed her character as strongly as he did everybody else in the movie. To where by the end, she is just kind of like this bag of money to be passed from Bruce Wayne back to Gordon. Put a shot in her and she'll be fine.
Yeah.
She didn't get a lot to do in that movie.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth because, like you said, Katie Holmes was, the person that Bruce Wayne cared about, right? So she's obviously a target if you're targeting Bruce Wayne. Same thing here. Gordon's baby son, like, if you're targeting Gordon, his wife, his son, they are who you target if you want to get his attention. If you want to make him do something, you target his family. So I get it, and it's very effective. Like that's why everyone fears the mob. That's why everyone fears, Kaiser Soze, because, he doesn't just kill you, he kills your family and your kids, and he, castrates your uncle, and you're like, what the fuck, why? Like,
you don't have to do this. They all say that.
Right. It's a device, right? So, like, just because it's a baby, it's like, well, it is what he really cares about. So,
it's true.
I think of Brad Pitt, in Seven, like, it's basically the same thing, but a little different.
Well, it's tricky because, this is obviously someone he would care about his own child. Very
right.
Gonna care about the child, but you can't write a baby as a character in any way other than just like an object. Whereas, Barbara gets targeted in this, and she holds her own, and she grows, and
Yep.
she has like an arc there. So it's more than just
Little
she
bit, yeah.
is. But you just can't do that with a baby, and so that's probably one of the reasons I don't really care for it in movies and books and stuff, because it's like, we're not going to go anywhere except this baby being the sad object. Kind of like in the movie we talked about the
Right.
other day, where as soon as somebody's announced as pregnant, you're like, oh, here we go.
You're right. Yeah.
Just, oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. I know where this is going.
Yeah. Yeah. You really, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I when I watched that scene with the baby on the bridge, I'm like, Batman's right there. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
That's just George. That's George. That's not movie watcher. That's just me. I'm like, the baby's gonna be fine.
I do really like the I'm revealing myself as Batman to you, and you're realizing that I'm Batman, but we're both going to pretend like we don't know what's going on here.
Yes.
I always like that in these things. This is a
Mhm.
particularly good one.
Yes.
It's just a shame the Batman voice isn't better, but what can you do?
Yep.
So it's an hour and 5 minutes. It saved you from reading a book. You should still read the book.
I have no problem reading books. Usually I don't do them in the course of like an hour and 5 minutes.
I peeked at, well, this is pretty short. You might be able to knock this one out pretty quick.
Okay.
The Killing Joke, I noticed they've got the animated feature of that on HBO Max right now. Do not watch that. Read that book. They don't have the guts to make that into a movie. So what they made
Killing Joke.
inferior to The Killing Joke, super short. Read it in less than an hour probably. But that is the one, that's the book that turned Travis into what he is today.
Okay.
And I told you they've only ever approached that Joker in one Batman movie ever, and it was actually an unofficial parody of The Dark Knight. So, best Joker they've put to screen, and you'll never get to see it. It's a shame.
Okay.
So, Batman the Animated Series. Did you watch this at all as a kid?
It seemed familiar, but I don't think so. I think it seemed familiar because it seems like every other cartoon that I watched, because I definitely watched a little bit of like Batman Beyond. Never really cared for it, to be honest with you. And I watched a lot of some Spider-Man, and my daughter's watching Spider-Man right now, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
But it had that motif, the way all these comic cartoons were. So it seems really familiar, but I don't think I've ever watched it for real.
Well, a couple of points of interest. I would argue that this one is the one that set the formula for all those shows. So, there were superhero shows before the animated series, but they never took it as seriously for the source material and just as a final product as this show did. The animated series is canon in most ways. And you really, most of the time these shows, like X-Men was good, Spider-Man's good, they would do some plots and stuff from the comic books, but you weren't seeing them add a lot to the character that would stick around in other media. Whereas this show introduces Harley Quinn, who's a major character now. I mean, shoot, a lot of it was written by Paul Dini, who's like one of the best comic writers of the 90s. So, I mean, you get really good folks making the show. They did it in some interesting ways. If you notice, it's very dark. They would start with a black cell instead of a white cell and work their way to add color. So just like inherently, they didn't have to add anything to make it dark. And so it just kind of stayed dark, which is kind of a cool thing.
That is cool.
Batman Beyond, you mentioned watching, was a sequel show to this, obviously. Same guy doing the voice of Bruce in Batman Beyond. Kevin Conroy, who still does the voice of Batman in all the video games. For the most part, like all the top tier Batman Arkham games are still that same voice. And so when you look at year one, you're just like, man, it's not necessarily that he's a bad Batman. It's just he's not Kevin Conroy, who is the voice of Batman.
Yeah.
So it's okay. So we talked about it during the Batman Begins episode that Ras Al Ghul, Ras Al Ghul,
Ras Al Ghul.
Only really been around since the late 70s, so he was kind of a newer villain. He had a couple of really good arcs in the comics, but it was the TV show that really made him like a mainstream character. Like every kid born in the late 80s knows Ras Al Ghul because of this show. When he popped up in Batman Begins, the only reason he was even slated for a movie that big is because of what the animated series brought to his character and to his regard with the fans. So
makes sense.
Take me through these episodes. We can just talk about one arc. Robin's been kidnapped. Oh no. Is this our first Robin appearance on the show? I think so.
No, well, we watched a tiny bit of the 60s Batman.
Oh, yes.
Movie, which, once you got past once you get to the shark repellent, you've pretty much seen the whole movie.
So, take that back.
At that point.
I love that movie.
I mean, that sets the tone for the whole movie, does it not?
I mean, yeah, shark repellent, bat spray.
Yeah, exactly. So, I guess second appearance of Robin.
So a little more serious. He doesn't have much to do here, but become the thing that gets passed around from bad guy to bad guy. But
yeah, he's the Katie Holmes of the.
He is the Katie Holmes of the animated series at this point.
These 2 episodes, yeah.
But you get to see the most important things. You get to see the Lazarus pits and how those work.
Mm-hmm.
You get to see frail Mr. Burns, Ras Al Ghul turn into like homicidal maniac Ras Al Ghul, which is a fun transition for a kid's show.
Until his daughter slaps him, and then he's back to normal again.
Yeah, and you get to meet Talia al Ghul, who you could probably tell from this episode, she appeared in one other episode earlier in the show, but we weren't really talking about Talia so much, so I had just skipped that one. But they did like a big tease at the end of that episode that Ras Al Ghul was watching the whole time. Ha 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 ha. Lots of laughing to end an episode and to go to commercial break.
Yeah.
That's a kid's show, I guess, in the 90s.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Now that you've seen what the comics proposed of him and you've seen what they did with it in Batman Begins, do you see why half of us knew it was him from the beginning because of the facial hair?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yes, definitely.
But you didn't know it for sure because they're already reinventing all these things and the Batmobile's a tank now. So maybe Ras is going to be this other guy that's dead. Oh, they did a good job moving the cards around so that you didn't know exactly what they were doing. But
yeah, I can't really comment on it because I didn't see Batman Begins knowing who Ras Al Ghul was, or Ras Al Ghul. So, I don't know. I don't know what I would have thought. I hope I would have thought, yeah, that's definitely going to be him, but I don't know.
I don't know if they gave you enough information to go on. I would imagine, and I couldn't know, but I could guess that, a critical movie watcher who wasn't familiar with these characters might look at this and go, oh, that's an interesting decision to do, whereas the nerds were like, oh, they did it. They really did it. We thought they weren't going to do it, but now they did it. It's like a trick more on the people that knew than on the people that didn't know.
Yeah.
Ballsy, man.
And now I understand why it was so difficult for you to explain to me whether whether Ras Al Ghul was one person or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's different. It's legitimately in Begins. I guess they don't really tell you, but I think they allude to that. Ras Al Ghul is just the leader of this group of people that have been around for thousands of years, and it's not necessarily always what's that actor's name?
Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam Neeson. It's not in the movie Begins. Liam Neeson is Ras Al Ghul. Liam Neeson isn't always Ras Al Ghul. He won't always be Ras Al Ghul. He wasn't always Ras Al Ghul, technically, because the movie doesn't really address it. So if we're talking real life situation, no Lazarus pits, he could just be a placeholder.
Right. He's an office holder. He's been elected
exactly.
president of the League of Shadows.
Right, exactly. Now in this is completely different in the animated series. He literally like has been alive for 1,000 years. Is what they made it seem like.
Yeah, he was rubbing elbows with Napoleon.
Right. Napoleon once told me blah blah blah. It's funny because I watched a part of this with my wife, and she's trying to predict what's going to happen, and she's like, I think I forget. I even forget what she said, and I'm like, no, I think what they're gonna reveal here is that Ras Al Ghul has been alive for 1,000 years, and she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I think that's what they're talking about with the pits, because like you told me about it, and I was like, I don't know, and I'm like, I'm watching it, and it's like all coming together, everything that you told me last week. I was like, okay, this is it. This is okay. I'm I'm gonna see it. This is the history of it. And she's like, no, that's crazy. And I'm like, no, that's what it's gonna be. And then, like it happens right in front of her eyes, and she's like, oh, okay, didn't see that coming. You know?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I think that they did a good job in the Begins movie of making sure that they like followed their P's and Q's well enough that a first time viewer unfamiliar with the characters would say, yes, this move holds water, right?
Yep.
But then for the nerds, they're just like, oh yeah, there's that realism grounded nonsense. Like, we're not doing Lazarus pits in this motherfucker.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, yeah, they did. See, that's why I liked Begins so much. To begin with, I had seen that movie when it came out, and I thought it was incredible then. And actually, the more I watched it, the less incredible I thought it was. But for different reasons. But when I first watched it, I thought it was incredible. And the reason what really stood out to me was this superhero has no superpowers. This dude just has like more money than God and an incredible will to do what he wants to do.
Yeah, he's just obsessed.
And everything in the movie, nothing is too far-fetched to have happened in real life. I mean, I guess some of it is, but it didn't feel like that when I was watching it. You know, like you said earlier, the plot to poison the water and do all this stuff. It's like, you know, if Nolan told you he was going to do that and he was going to make it feel like it could really happen, you'd be like, oh, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, let me see your dailies.
Yeah, they
I just
did
need
that.
to know.
They made it seem every villain seemed like it could be a real person that really villainized that way. You know? And even in the next one, Dark Knight, where the villains get a little bit more what's the word I should I don't know. How do you describe it? Flashy.
Escalated.
Yeah, like flashy, you know, theatrical.
Theatrical's a good way to put it.
They get more theatrical, but it still hits a certain way. You know, it still hits real. You know, especially not so much Joker, but especially Two-Face. Like Two-Face hits hard in the next movie. Like definitely could be a real person for sure. But
I saw an article this week on one of those like throw crap up and clickbait people into hitting it just to get like, you know, not a journalism outlet, but one of those kind of middle of the road garbage sites. You know, 10 things you don't know about the Dark Knight, or top 9 things you'd never know, you know.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, sure.
And so I was like, okay. Or maybe it was influential movies. You know, 9 movies that influenced the Dark Knight. And I went, oh no. Right before we do these episodes, is someone finally going to realize what they're looking at? No. They missed the point again. And so I'm just like, okay. When we get to the Dark Knight, Travis is going to lose his mind when we get to the Italian influences, etc., etc. He's just going to be like, no, you know, it's going to be like a Wilhelm scream. It's just all you're going to get from him. And that's okay. Travis, I'm excited for you to be in on that discussion.
Yeah. I'm kind of in a place where, like, you show me these things of, like, where things came from, their Italian roots, and, you know, there's always the question, is it stolen? Is it borrowed? Is it homage? Like, is it okay? Is it not okay? And I'm like, I don't really want to say I don't really care, but, like, I kind of feel like every time I watch the two things side by side, I'm just like, okay, well, yeah, it was Italian first, but Hollywood did it way better. Like, I always feel that way. And maybe it's just because, like, Hollywood to me is like home, like, and
Well,
I'm
and
not
there's
used
always more
to.
money involved. Even stuff like Halloween is
Right.
made
Maybe it's just not fair.
for so much more money than the Italian movies were at the time. So
Yeah.
it's tricky.
Maybe,
And I go back and forth too because there are great examples of filmmakers like Christopher Nolan who they take liberally from things that are in the zeitgeist, right? They borrow from old sources where you're supposed to know this stuff. And so when they do big swings to bring in, like Dark Knight Rises is based on A Tale of Two Cities. And they said that from before the movie was released in interviews. They'd be like, oh yeah, we're doing A Tale of Two Cities, but we're doing it with Batman and Bane. And so if you know that going in and you're familiar with the source material, there's a scene in which you're like, oh, we're going to get a whiff of grape shot. Cool. Like history, but it's not stealing, right? That's history. It's it's public domain stuff. Like it's all good. That's on the level.
Yeah.
That's good. And it's another thing too with Batman movies, because you have so much canon that is owned by DC Comics. So they can say, hey, we're going to do this movie, but let's reach back and do this thing out of the comics that we did back in the 40s because this little bitty bit worked. So let's just sprinkle that in for the nerds, right? And that's fan service, but it also can help contribute to the character, and it can bring attention to old sources that need more attention by a modern audience.
Right.
The difference is sometimes when these filmmakers steal, they do so and then they cover their tracks. And that's a problem. That's the deal. When I talked to a certain person, was like, hey, when did you see this movie? And they were like, oh
yeah.
Oh, I never saw that movie until way later. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, come on, bro.
But like you stole all his stuff. And then you named a character Lindsay. Which, hat tip to Travis. I never even realized that till later, but god dang. The girl's name is Lindsay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Travis, for pointing that out. But anyway, hopefully it doesn't get to that level, right? Because Christopher Nolan, I'm going to put him up there with Kubrick as far as like quality of attention to detail and able to, basically overcome all the obstacles that would normally scuttle anybody else's movie and just make, pretty much 100% awesome movies for the most part.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if we're ever going to see a filmmaker like him ever touch a property like Batman again, but my God, what if we did?
Yeah.
When they were making Dark Knight Rises and they were, now I don't know about you, George, but I was in Dark Knight Rises. I don't know if you were.
I was not.
But
I was aware that you were in it though.
It came at a time we didn't have kids yet, and my wife was working a ton and I was working a regular amount. And so I spent a lot of time researching that movie before it came out. And by the time I had finished the bit where I was an extra, I knew 90% of the plot of that movie. I had a couple of questions, I was like, are they going to do, are they going to do who? Is this guy going to turn out to be who? Or is this guy going to turn out to be who? Right?
But
other than those couple of things, like that movie, I knew everything that was going to happen. And I think it still has ruined it for me because every time I go back to revisit, I'm like, they should have done it this other way. Also, this movie's too long. Should have been 3 different movies, whatever. So the thing is, I've stopped doing that. The new Batman movie that's coming out, I watched one trailer a long time ago to make sure it looked decent. And I've been blinders ever since because I want to go in and let the movie have a chance to impress me.
Right.
I say all that to say this. When I was doing the research for Dark Knight Rises, there is a bit that basically they were using CGI to create pits in the ground for like containment of people. We didn't know it at the time though. We just saw pictures of giant green screen on the ground in the shape of pits. And I was like, holy shit, they're doing Lazarus Pits. Because there was already rumors that Liam Neeson was coming back. And I was like, oh my God, what a twist. If you have this, very grounded beginning And then you swing around to the back, and holy crap, they do it. They pull it off. Nolan can, and then they just didn't.
Yeah.
Huh. But for a minute there, we all thought we were getting Lazarus Pits.
That damn internet.
Jerks.
Makes you think all kinds of things.
Yeah, it just gives you hope in places you don't need it. It is kind of interesting to think about whether Liam Neeson's Ras Al Ghul was in some ways like training Batman to be his replacement, but never said it, you know? Because, I mean, you get that obviously from the cartoon quite a bit, you know. The Lazarus Pits aren't hitting like they used to, and I've got to find an heir, and girls can't be in charge, so I've got to find a dude. Like, that part's a little tricky.
Right.
But it's interesting to think that, like, yeah, you could say, given how quickly Bruce rises through the ranks, if he performs well, you know, he could be in line to be the next Ras Al Ghul, and he just threw that aside.
I mean, that's the way I interpreted it when I first saw the movie Begins. Like, that was definitely how I interpreted it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. You could also, you know, because they're going to destroy his town, he's like perfectly placed to be a patsy. If something goes wrong, you know, just shove him out in front of the cameras and be like, I don't know why this guy came back from the dead and then killed his own city, but here he is.
But I mean, in some ways, I know that the League of Shadows was trying to destroy Gotham. But why? You know? It was because it had become so bad.
It was beyond saving.
It was beyond saving. But if you don't destroy it and you do save it, both methods are saving technically, right? Quote unquote saving it, destroying it to save it, or just saving it to save it. It's like the same thing, right?
Well, it's the difference between taking Liam Neeson to the hospital and reviving him versus shooting him in the face and fighting a new Ras Al Ghul, right? You're still saving Ras Al Ghul, but you had to kill a guy to do it.
What if Batman, Bruce Wayne, in denying becoming the next Ras Al Ghul and the leader of the League of Shadows, actually just becomes the new League of Shadows, run a completely different way?
So you're saying, like, take over the Enterprise and then, like, rebrand?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, obviously he didn't, but, you know, Ras Al Ghul, in trying to groomed him to be what would save Gotham, unknowingly.
I mean, it'd be cool. There's a thing I've always liked. It depends on which interpretation of the Thomas Wayne, the dad, you're getting in the, because every comic kind of picks and chooses which version of canon it's working with, which gives you a lot of flexibility, but it becomes hard to talk about things without a lot of qualifiers. But there's a really good graphic novel called Kingdom Come, which is like apocryphal, not within canon. Superman chilling with aliens, chilling with Batman, end of the world kind of stuff. Lots of religious allusion to. Really good book. But toward the end of the book, for spoilers for anybody that's going to read Kingdom Come, and he should because it's good. But spoilers for that book. Batman changes his like uniform and symbol from black to white, but with a red bat, and like basically stops trying to fight bad guys and instead tries to help people. And his dad is a doctor, right? So it's like he gets away from this quest to avenge his father, and instead he like uses his resources of his own as Batman to like further the efforts of his father, the doctor.
So
he's like the Red Cross, but it's like the Red Bat.
I was just thinking that. It sounds like the Red Cross. He becomes, you know, the Red Bat instead.
Which is cool, but they don't really go into like how that actually helps, you know? And by that point he's old. But I just always thought that was nice to like stop worrying about avenging your dead father and instead to work toward his goals when he was alive.
I like it. It makes perfect sense. Makes more sense than, the way Rises ended. But yeah.
Well, he was not wearing hockey pads.
No, sir.
Oh, man, I really wanted to love Rises, but we'll get to it eventually once we cross a few other bridges.
Right.
Now, Batman does some actual detective work in the animated series, but it feels very much like, that kind of detective work I don't like in movies where they just tell you the answer and then tell you like some really obscure way they knew the answer.
Yep.
Because you can't play along, it's no fun. It's very Sherlock Holmes, but
Yep.
It's fine. It's fine.
Really, you thought Sherlock Holmes? I thought Scooby Doo.
Well, the movie Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. is what I was thinking of, not the actual text.
Okay, yeah.
But just this little montage clip of all these things coming together in his head, and then him telling you the answer, and it's like, well, there was no way for me to guess. Why am I even watching this movie? You could just tell me the answer at the end of the movie.
Right.
It was no Deep Red, I'll tell you that. Deep Red keeps you guessing the whole time.
Yeah.
But at least you get to see why Travis and I were sad that Liam Neeson never gets to call Batman detective.
Right.
I always find it weird in these shows, especially the ones that are targeted at kids, where older men are trying to marry off their daughters. Because, they're not handling it like, if it was like an old timey, European cartoon for kids, I'm trying to imagine any situation where they would do this, but where it's like, oh, we need you to marry my daughter for this political reason. You could sell that to a kid and they'd be like, yeah, princes and princesses. Okay. But on this show and a lot of shows like it, it's like, my daughter's pretty hot, right? It's really creepy.
So weird.
It doesn't.
Very weird.
I can't think of a way to fix it, but I don't want to give it a lot of thought, TBH. But
yeah,
at least we'll never have to worry about Talia popping up again on this show.
No.
I mean, maybe. Spoiler alert for Dark Knight Rises, but
I enjoyed Talia. I'm not gonna lie.
There you go. Rock and roll, man.
Megan was annoyed that her shirt kept changing.
For continuity's sake, you mean?
Through the episode, they're like, she was wearing the shirt that had a hole in it, basically like a little window to the cleavage.
It was a boob vent. Yeah, it's like a heat sink.
Yeah, exactly. And,
from what I understand of having breasts, it's like a heat sink on a computer. You've got to get some airflow in there.
Correct. And it was just changing size through the whole cartoon. And that annoyed her.
And she didn't want to join us tonight to be a third voice as to the quality of the cartoon.
Yeah, she I asked her and she said, I don't know what I would add except for that she enjoyed the scene when Gordon's son was born. She wasn't even in the room, but she heard the audio, and the line goes something like this. You hear a door open. It's like, Lieutenant, your baby was born. It's a boy. Your wife is fine. And that's like the end of the scene. And she's like, wow, that was she's like, I can tell that he's not in the room. This is very old school. And it's just, your baby is born. It's a boy. Your wife is fine. And that is all you need to know.
May your first child be a masculine child.
Right. And then she said the baby was just crying in every scene that the baby was in for the rest of the show.
I mean, like I said, what are you going to do with the baby? They cry, they get kidnapped. That's it. That's all the baby can do.
Right. You're right.
All right. Well, we're going to jump headlong into our next movie. One of the major influences on how Christopher Nolan made The Dark Knight. Now, we may be having a guest, and I hope you're excited to explore a Stanley Kubrick movie called The Killing. With a good friend of the show. So we look forward to seeing you here next week, sir.
All right. I'll be here.
Same bat time.
Same bat channel.
Boom. We didn't even practice that. Good job, man.
No, we didn't. It's just in us.
Thank you for joining us on the Remedial Film Class podcast. As always, you can find us at facebook.com/remedialfilmpod. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at remedialfilmpod, and heck, you can even email us, remedialfilmpod@gmail.com. We'll see you here back next week with a visit from Dix Handley in The Killing. That cartoon is pretty good. Like, it's dark enough that, like, I waited until the kids were probably like 5 before I showed them anything, just in case something scared them.
Mm-hmm.
But like, even my daughter is just like, oh, I want to watch more Batman. She got to watch the one with Clayface the other day. She loved that one.
Yeah.
They should have called him, what did she say? Lotion Face. I was like, well, I mean, you're not wrong.
Mm.
But yeah, if you want to check some of those out, the first 2 or 3 seasons are real good. I would recommend one called His Silicon Soul. That's probably my favorite one of the show. Also, The Gray Ghost one is an excellent episode. It might just get your ghost.
Why? I'm actually like really, like it just excites me that my daughter is watching Spider-Man.
Yeah, man. The
And-
90s
and
one?
in-
I didn't ask.
and enjoying it. I don't even know which one.
Does it have the
is.
Spider-Man theme song?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, the 90s one.
Yeah, and I'm like, she's watching it, and like she's like into it, and I'm like, why? And then my wife is like, because I was like, why is she on the Spider-Man kick? Like, I don't get it. Like, I didn't even introduce her to it. She just wanted to watch Spider-Man. Like, she saw it on Disney Plus or something, and she wanted to watch it. And she's like, well, she's going to school, and like, her friend Harry and her friend Joe, they're always talking about, Spider-Man and Batman, and she doesn't know anything. So she sees it, and she's like, oh, I want to know about that. So she's like watching it. I'm like, holy crap. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, your kid's old enough to be influenced by her peers.
Yeah. And like in the same way I was.
Yeah, isn't that
Like,
crazy?
I'm like, I need to, it's like, whoa, what are you listening to? What is it now that's so great? Oh, I need to look up that band. And then like, I get into it too. I'm like, yeah, I do like this. I'm like, holy crap. Like, she's doing that thing where she becomes part of a group so that like when she gets older, she can like separate from that group and become an individual.
Yeah.
But that separating from the group can't actually happen unless you become a part of a group first.
It's exciting,
she's-
man. She's
she's
hit
developing
a new phase.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
But I was like, I mean, it's Spider-Man. But I was like, Spider-Man's fine, but you got to watch some Batman.
Yeah. Yeah, don't start her with His Silicon Soul. It might be too creepy. But the Gray Ghost one's real good.
Okay.
But, it's a good show. The Two-Face, they do a 2-parter to introduce Harvey Dent transforming into Two-Face. That's a real good one.
Yeah.
There's one with Joker Fish that's super creepy.
I noticed when I set, because I never had HBO Max before. So I got HBO Max. And I made a kid's profile so that she could watch Batman and stuff. And you know how like you set the parental controls?
Yeah.
So I set the parental controls, and then I go into HBO and I look up Batman, and I'm like, the shit that I was watching is not on here.
Yeah, no, they're targeted to adults. A lot of them.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know what else is in like that animated series. I know that there was content in year 1 that definitely is adult.
No, year one's like
like-
a hard PG-13, but the
Yeah.
animated series was legit for kids, so
But
it should be safe.
I know, but I'm like, but it's not there. When I set my parental controls,
So
as
even the animated series doesn't get into the kids profile, because it's like
well,
a Y7 or something.
the way I set it.
Yeah.
So I have to go in there and like figure out what it's rated so that I can get it so that she can watch it. But then again, I'm like, maybe I should watch all of them before I show her. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
like, what's in it if it's not if it's rated a certain thing. So anyway, I gotta like figure that out. But I really want Eva to get into Batman.
I think it'll be worth it. Start her with that
Yeah.
60s movie that's really, really good and silly.
With the shark repellent.
Shark repellent bat spray.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Or that old TV show if you can find. I don't know what network that's streaming on, but they're all pretty kid friendly. There's plenty of like innuendo jokes that the kids would never get because they're too
Right.
subtle.
Right.
But it's still entertaining as long as you realize it's going to be silly.
Actually, Eva, we all watch movies on Fridays. Like we watch a kids movie with Eva, right? And we realized when I suggested, I think it was Stuart Little, that like Eva was like, no, and I'm like, why? And we realized that she's never watched a movie with real people in it.
Oh, that's funny.
It's like it's always Pixar or like cartoon or something. Whereas like Stuart Little, like it has like actual actors, real people. And so she ended up watching it and she liked it. And this week we watched 101 Dalmatians, the remake with who is it? Hugh Laurie.
Oh,
Yeah,
House. Yeah, it's Hugh Laurie, yeah.
He was also in Stuart Little.
He's in the Spider-Man movies,
no,
isn't
who
he?
played Cruella de Vil? What the hell's her name? Oh, Glenn Close. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, we watched another movie with real people in it with Eva, and she liked it. So
Well, then she's ready for Batman 66.
Batman 66.
There you go.
I don't know. Too much real people in that one.
I don't know. Once
Maybe
like
not.
Catwoman shows up, she'll be like, Catwoman. I don't know if she knows who that is yet, so maybe not.
No, that's what I'm saying. She needs to watch some cartoons.